Animation is an incredibly competitive scene. It could take someone years, or even their entire life, to make something that is even worthy enough to be viewed by some of the world's most prestigious art schools. Though sometimes you get idiots who have basically never animated their entire life somehow get the opportunity of a lifetime to get accepted into an art school. Oh, and just for clarification, I was one of those idiots. I thought it would be a very smart decision on my part to major in animation, despite never really animating before. Like at all. But I mean, where's the problem with that, right? It's like, I'm going to school, and school is supposed to teach you, so I'll figure it out eventually. Right? Well, kinda. Despite not having the experience, I can't deny that I wasn't an artsy kid growing up. To most teachers, I wasted a lot of my time doing all sorts of stuff like making comic books for other kids to read, origami, and watching a crap ton of cartoons growing up. Unfortunately, as how all things go, everything basically got crumpled up and tossed into a pit of flames as soon as I sold my soul to middle school. Apparently, talking about cartoons that weren't Family Guy or SpongeBob wasn't considered cool anymore. And making all these comics and other sorts of thingamajigs were now lame. And so, I had to do what all emotionally mature middle schoolers had to do: seclude all of my passions and feelings from the world around me. Years later roll by, when I was in high school. Sophomore year, I think. A funny question then popped into my head. What am I gonna do in 5 years? All of these weirdos around me had somehow figured out what they were going to do in life. Yet here I was, lounging on my broken bed, watching reruns of Gravity Falls and Phineas and Ferb, without a single thought about what I was going to do in my career. Until it hit me. Despite the artsy aspect of me kind of fading away, I was still passionate about the world of animation. I realized my calling. Or so I thought. So, during the remaining 2 or so years left I had in high school, I crammed through every single animation tutorial I could find, had an intense time picking out my school, paid an unhealthily amount of money completely out of my pockets, and boom, I am now an official animation major. And there I am, at the new school. And good lord, those first couple of days sure were interesting. The first time I walked into my new status quo, I lay witness to the most awkward set of classmates that I ever met so far. My kind of people. It didn't help that it was probably the coldest room I've ever been in as well. I almost thought I was in purgatory for a moment. Like, I heard animation was hell, but I was not expecting that literally. As I took my seat, I laid witness to this behemoth of a Cintiq on my desk. Like, I'm pretty sure this was big enough to block out the entire sun, but I didn't think it was that much of a problem because I assumed animation majors didn't really need the sun anyway. It could explain why the room was cold, though. Our professor, we'll call him Professor Maxwell, was interesting. The school I went to wasn't necessarily a traditional art school, but it did have an animation program. The funny thing about this is that since the animation division wasn't the school's highest priority, they had Professor Maxwell be the one who would basically teach all of our animation classes. So our experience in the school was heavily dependent on the type of teacher Professor Maxwell was. And, well, I wouldn't call him terrible, but the best way to describe him is that he was a very old school animator, but with CGI. He also taught us how to animate in Lightwave as opposed to the typical Blender or Maya, which was also an interesting choice, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Our first course with Professor Maxwell was the Introduction to the 12 Principles of Animation. Rolls right off the tongue. Most of the time, we would just follow along Maxwell on his main monitor, And boy, how I could describe the process of animating on a Cintiq for the first time. Photoshop was basically this intimidating mess that had a lot more functionality than I was ever expecting it to have. About half of the time, I would always sheepishly raise my hand and go, hey, Mr. Maxwell, I, deleted my animation timeline. What would then proceed to happen was that Maxwell would essentially lean his tall body all the way down to my monitor and try to fix whatever stupid thing I managed to do, while his lovely Maxwell breath would flow into my face. Throughout my first semester of college, I was sort of hit with a reality check. I kind of suck at drawing. I struggled hard with anatomy, line weights, and all sorts of other art mumble jumble. So, after constantly seeing all of the cool stuff my classmates would make while I would make dud after dud, it made me think, I should really improve myself by making stuff that I definitely won't be capable of doing. So, my idea of being a better animator meant be as stupidly ambitious as possible. We're then assigned our final, being a short film. Yeah, we had to do a short film in our introduction class. Great. I decided to have my short revolve around a crook trying to make off with a big wad of cash into the sewer system. And oh boy, it didn't really end out that well. For the both of us. I still barely knew how to work Photoshop. And conveniently, I missed out the day where we were taught After Effects. So I was completely blind. And to make things even better, me and another student also had the misfortune of updating our software during our projects. Never update your software when you're working on a project! Okay, so I'm not the exact smartest when it comes to tech, but the main gist that I get out of it is, if you update your software, for some reason, it makes your renders longer. And by long, I mean we both had to wait 12 hours for our project to finish. Okay, so this is my first major animation project, so of course it's gonna be rough around the edges, as one might say. But I think my first ever short film will make you question why I even bothered in the first place. So, I bet you guys are wondering what was the thing that took almost a day to render out. Well, keep in mind that this played in front of the entire class. Moving on, as much shade as I want to throw to my first semester freshman self, I do have to acknowledge that if it wasn't for this film, I probably wouldn't have grown as an artist. I still can't decide if I was brave or stupid to try to pursue animation with such little knowledge I had. The main takeaway is, yeah, you're probably going to suck at making something first, but honestly, there's kind of a beauty to it. It is basically our launching point into hopefully making something better someday, and while I'm not some big animator or artist, now anyways, I think I'm mostly proud of my personal growth, and as much as I kind of want to disown my short film money down the drain, I can't ignore that it did bring me somewhere. Here. We'll just see how that goes.